much more effective than a one profession approach. Time to collapse territories around each helping profession. Quite a big response to this, actually, so we might come back to that particular story maybe later in the week or next week. Now, regarding your best foods, in my impossible dreams, I would fly back to Istanbul in the early 1990s to eat at the Doi Doi restaurant, says Andrew. And via
best breakfast in the world, Istanbul.
Mozzarella made in Nelson by the Italians, best ever. There we have it. Nikki Pellegrino, Petty Elliott, thank you very much for joining me on the panel this afternoon.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate it. I'm back tomorrow. Wallace Chapman, see you then.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere ake nei, community-run COVID checkpoints will be rolled out in Northland ahead of the long weekend, despite police saying they're not necessary. Confirmation a max vaccination program will take at least a year. So what does that mean for tourism and businesses already hanging by a thread? The Cook Islands Prime Minister explains why he's put the brakes on a flight from New Zealand following our latest community COVID case. Crooks are peddling stolen bikes on social media. We talk to cycling advocates who say the black market is booming like never before. And the end of the golden weather for the South Island at least. A cold front is on its way and temperatures will drop by 20 degrees.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata with DNA. The surge in testing since the discovery of a COVID-19 case in Northland has yet to uncover any further spread of the virus into the community. A 56-year-old woman tested positive on Saturday, 10 days after she left managed isolation at the Pullman Hotel. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
The whole of New Zealand has been holding its breath for fear of another outbreak. And authorities say don't exhale just yet. That said, all signs are encouraging, described as such by both the COVID-19 Minister and the Director General of Health. All close contacts of the Northland case have tested negative for the virus. The same is true for 255 guests who stayed at the Pullman Hotel between January the 9th and 24th, with results for 98 guests still outstanding. From Parliament, Craig McCulloch.
Kaumātua in the far north are being advised by iwi leaders to stay at home. Te Tai Tokoro iwi leaders met yesterday to discuss how best to protect their people after the positive case in the region. The Ngāpuhi Pandemic Response Team project leader Tia Ashby says they're taking a cautious approach, especially for people over 50 and those with compromised immunity.
We just need to be vigilant and protect our whakapapa. Many have now engaged resurgent protocols, mobilised our health workforce and have extended testing hours. All these messages have been communicated out to whānau and to the wider community.
Tia Ashby says the DHB was too slow to publicise the places the infected person had visited. The hosts of the annual Iwi Chairs Forum, due to be held in Waitangi from February the 3rd to the 5th, have confirmed that it will now be held online. The Climate Change Minister has spoken with his American counterpart John Kerry. James Shaw says Mr Kerry stressed that the US response to climate change would be driven by scientific evidence. He says they discussed the global climate talks to be held in Glasgow at the end of the year and the impact of climate change on the Pacific. Mr Shaw says he expressed New Zealand's commitment to work with the US and welcomed America rejoining the Paris Agreement. An Otago gas fitter has been fined more than $120,000 for incorrectly installing a gas water heater, leading to the death of a 12-year-old boy. Jesse Samuel from Alexandra suffered carbon monoxide poisoning while showering at his family's bach in Haast in October 2018. Gas fitter Michael Cartwright signed off on his co-worker's installation of the water heater, despite never seeing the work. The heater was not meant to be used in a bathroom. Cartwright and the company, Laser Plumbing Alexandra, last year pleaded guilty to charges under the Plumbers, Gas Fitters and Drain Layers Act. $70,000 in reparation was also ordered to be paid to the boy's family. Canterbury has been hit with another day of very hot weather, with many towns' temperatures topping 30 degrees. Temperatures of 36 degrees in Blenheim and 32 in Christchurch have been recorded. It was 34 degrees in Rangiora today, and local resident Rhonda has been struggling in the heat.
A bit much, actually. I'm trying to find places in the shade. I'm having a nice cold milkshake. That's my lunch. Yesterday was very, very difficult. I've just loved summer so much because it's been so much cooler, and now we've got this heat wave coming through. I think it's very hard for a lot of people to deal with.
Rhonda, a Rangiora resident. The Met Service says a cold front moving up the South Island later this evening is set to put an end to the high temperatures. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 5. American Magic has returned to the water 10 days after the dramatic capsize in the America's Cup Challenger Selection Series. The repaired boat Patriot went out on the Waitemata Harbour today as the team prepares for the semi-finals against Luna Rossa starting on Friday. Our America's Cup reporter Felicity Reid was there.
The Americans spent several hours sailing and testing the repairs to their AC-75 Patriot this afternoon. The challengers, as well as the defender, Team New Zealand, were out training at the same time. Patriot's new paint job, which pays tribute to the 3 other nations that helped the Americans during the capsize and repairs, was on show. An image of a band-aid made out of the flags of New Zealand, Italy and the Union Jack with the words "Thank you" are on the hull where the significant hole was. The winner of the semi-finals will race against Team UK to decide who then takes on Team New Zealand for the Old Mug. This is Felicity Reid.
Batsman Matthew Wade has been dropped from Australia's Test squad to tour South Africa, but has been named vice-captain of the 2020 cricket side to tour here next month. Aaron Finch will captain the T20 side for the 5-game series against the Black Caps. Manchester City have returned to the top of English football's Premier League after scoring a 5-0 win at West Bromwich Albion. West Ham are up to 4th after a 3-2 win at Crystal Palace, while Arsenal improved to 8th following a 3-1 win over Southampton. Leeds beat Newcastle 2-1. That's the news.
New Zealand prepares for the COVID-19 vaccine.
All the logistical stuff is extraordinarily difficult to run smoothly, and that's what we need to have set in place.
As a dispute threatens the distribution,
this spat between the EU and the pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca has really intensified over the past 24 hours.
assurances it won't affect rollout here.
In our discussions with Pfizer, we're still very much on track for getting deliveries in the first quarter.
On a roll, Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Corin Dan, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, fine and hot. A few showers spreading north from tomorrow afternoon. For the remainder of the North Island, also Nelson and Marlborough Sounds. Fine weather, apart from areas of cloud mainly tomorrow morning and evening. Brief showers spreading north tomorrow. For the rest of Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine and hot. Rain or showers spreading north tomorrow morning, with some heavy rain inland from tomorrow afternoon. Otago and Southland, fine and warm with high cloud. A period of rain possible tonight, followed by scattered showers. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland mainly fine, with a brief heavy rain in Fiordland spreading northwards tonight and tomorrow morning, followed by a few showers. And Chatham Islands becoming cloudy tonight, a few showers from tomorrow afternoon. RNZ National, it's coming up to 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Community-run COVID checkpoints will be operating in Northland from tomorrow without police support. Te Tai Tokerau is expecting an influx of Aucklanders ahead of the long weekend, and some people are nervous after a local woman tested positive for the South Africa strain of COVID after being released from managed isolation in Auckland. She caught it from another returnee who was also staying at the Pullman Hotel. So far, none of the woman's contacts have tested positive, but the Director General of Health says he's not breathing out just yet. Te Tai Tokerau Border Control operated Northland checkpoints during last year's COVID outbreak, and spokesman Hone Harawira believes they're needed again, but he says the police won't help.
It's really disappointing to us, and I'll tell you why. Police have the authority to run a checkpoint and stop every vehicle on the road for alcohol, for firearms, for a licence, for warrant, for registration, and for just about anything else they want to stop people for. But they won't support a checkpoint to provide information to the public about the threat of COVID and the impact it may have on our kaumatu and kuia. We're hugely disappointed. I've just sent a note to them to say, stop quibbling, guys, get on board. Get on board with this. Our people's health and well-being is under threat, then somebody needs to step up on their behalf, and that's our job, the State Border Control.
Given the police position, tell us, what are you going to do with these checkpoints and when?
We stood up our checkpoints last time without the declared support of the police. They came in and supported what we were doing because they could see what we were doing was in the interest of keeping our community safe, and that's one of the guiding principles of the police department, keeping communities safe, and that's exactly what it is that we're trying to do here. So we made it clear, and it's not to stop and drop, turn people around, and none of that kind of carry on.
Is it a green light for you tomorrow morning with these checkpoints, regardless of what the police position is?
Regardless of what the police position is, our position is we are there to defend the rights and interests and well-being of our kaumatu and kuia and the people of Taitokerau, and we would love to have the police on board with us. If they can't be there, that's something that they have to consider, not us.
Long weekend coming up. Hone, what are you expecting in terms of traffic and visitors?
I'm expecting tens of thousands of people to come from Auckland, and given we've just had that community case in Mangawhai, I'm expecting things to be kind of ugly. Our aim is to try and keep it calm, keep it positive as much as possible, keep it informative and educational, and wish people a good weekend.
So what's the deal going to be? Are you going to wave cars down and then are you going to have a conversation? Are you going to ask them things?
Yeah.
What will you be saying?
We run a proper traffic management structure with vehicles waved to the side. Not all vehicles. Commercial vehicles we're allowed to go through. Public service vehicles we're allowed to go through. We don't stop them at all. But private transport, we bring them to one side. We give them a quick corridor, give them a pamphlet letting them know health authority phone numbers. Should they have any concerns of their own during the weekend while they're up in our territory, and then wishing them well. Stay in touch if they've got any troubles.
What do you expect from visitors?
Well, I'm hoping that they will be as positive about their responses as we are about our delivery. Our aim is not to scare people. Our aim is not to threaten people. Our aim is to educate and inform in a positive and uplifting way.
So you expect them all to stop for you?
I'm hoping they will. The last time we ran this, they did. We see no reason why they shouldn't do it again.
So what exactly have police said to you about these checkpoints?
They said that although they can stop people for all kinds of other things, they haven't had a ruling about checkpoints for information on COVID, which is bloody ridiculous. The biggest threat to the country right now is COVID. It's not warrant of fitness, it's not registration, it's not license, it's always alcohol, but it's not a whole lot of other factors that they can stop people for. All we're asking them is to support checkpoints to educate and inform the public.
You know, Hone, some people have been really critical of these checkpoints in the past, saying, well, they're not legal. If the police aren't there, they shouldn't be happening. I mean, what do you say? What do you say to that?
Oh, look, no offence. They bitched and moaned even when the police were there. They bitched and moaned even when the police were there. We've got rednecks up and down the country, and they will continue to be that way. 95% of the people of Taitokerau are supportive of the efforts of the Border Control to keep their communities safe, including a lot of people who don't live up here, but who have parents or uncles and aunties who do. So, yeah, we don't measure it by that. We measure it by the importance of the need, and the need is high. So we're making a decision to act.
So while you say, in essence, the police are on the fence here in terms of whether they're going to throw their support behind you, what would you like to say to them right now about this?
Yeah, I'd say to them that a checkpoint to educate and inform the public about the current threat of the South African strain to the public of New Zealand, in particular on Auckland anniversary weekend, to the public as they travel throughout Northland and to Northlanders is extremely high. And any support they can give to our efforts to provide that education and information should be supported, and we would welcome it.
Hone Harawira there, and he says those locally run COVID checkpoints are planned for areas around Dargaville, Kaitaia and Waiomio, and they'll be in place from tomorrow. Now, police have provided Checkpoint with a statement. Northland Police Inspector Ricky Phil says police are aware that a local group plans to re-establish checkpoints in Northland. At this stage, police are not aware of any specific details around the plan. He says the police are coming to this kaupapa from the same place out of a need to protect the most vulnerable in the community. The statement goes on to say police respect and recognise the good intentions of the group. However, while New Zealand remains in alert level 1, police do not believe there is any requirement for checkpoints at this time. And as such, the police's expectations are that COVID checkpoints will not be operating. It is 14 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on that one. Are you up north? Do you think the checkpoints are needed? Are you going to be travelling up there over Auckland anniversary weekend? Happy to stop and have a chat at these checkpoints or not? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It could be another year and a half before our borders open and Kiwis are vaccinated and able to travel freely. COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins has revealed any mass COVID vaccination program would run for 12 months, and depending on when vaccines arrive, that could take us to mid next year or beyond. The minister expects the first shipment from Pfizer by March, but that's small quantities and already earmarked for frontline workers.
I do want to reiterate this is likely to be a year-long process. It's important to note when we start vaccinating, vaccines will not be available to the public at large. Our first shipments of vaccines will be very carefully targeted to those most at risk, which in the first instance will include our border workers, those working in our managed isolation facilities, and their closest contacts. And then as we progress, we will expand the net out wider. We do want to scale up to making vaccines available to the general public as quickly as we can, but that will depend on the supply being available. I mean, if you just look at the maths on that, it's actually, you have to vaccinate about 10 million times to get to 5 million people because you'll need a double dose of that. Depending on how many we can get up to a day, if we were getting up to say 50,000 a day, you do the maths, that's about 200 days it would take to complete the overall vaccination campaign. It may well be that we can have a series of targeted events, if you like, where we can get those numbers up significantly higher than that. But we just have to, it will be a numbers game, and at this point we're planning for scaling up as quickly as we can. We're looking at the workforce and so on.
Chris Hipkins. So what does that all mean for New Zealand's tourism industry? Those businesses heavily reliant on overseas visitors who've been hanging on, expecting, hoping for a bit of respite in the new year. Kiwibank Chief Economist Jared Kerr is not surprised by today's timeline. In fact, he's been operating on a far more pessimistic forecast.
Look, it means we're going to have to deal with border closures until the middle of next year, and most of us had taken that into consideration already. So the Treasury came out with a line in the sand of saying sometime early in 2021, around January, borders might start to reopen. Our assumptions at Kiwibank, a little bit more pessimistic. We were thinking around the middle of next year, and it's just a guess, right? We don't have greater information than what you heard today. So in our assumptions and in our forecast, we have put in another year of border closures.
So tourism then, the ones that rely on international tourists, some of them are going to be hanging by a thread. They were holding out for something this year. What do we do? Do we let them fold?
Yeah, good question. And I think if we are asked to think about this in terms of a team of 5 million, then we're asking a few to suffer so that most can benefit. And we've chosen this eradication strategy. This is the downside of it. Tourism and education are being hit, and that represents just under 5% of our economy, basically to protect the other 95%. And I think that, helping these businesses through the next year and a half would be beneficial when we come out the other side. And there is light at the end of the tunnel here. New Zealand is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. That won't change. People still want to come down here when they can. So when we do open up, it would be great if we open up back to full capacity in the tourism and education industry.
So is that a moral or economic decision when you talk about it there, sort of 5% being sacrificed for the 95%?
I think it's an economic question. Are we going to allow businesses to fold or lose capacity in some areas while we're protecting others? And I think if we can, if there's good that do really well, pre-COVID, post-COVID, it would be great if they're still around to pick up where they left off.
But you're kind of comfortable with tourism being the collateral damage if it comes to it?
Well, it's the decision that we've made with this eradication strategy. It's not something I'm comfortable with. I'd love to try and boost it more with more domestic tourism and resources going into it to help it through this period. But the fact is, Kiwis spend around $5 billion a year on domestic tourism, and we attract around $17 billion a year in international tourism. So even though Kiwis are spending a lot more, and we could double the amount of domestic tourism that we do, there's still a big shortfall there, and it's about working through this period, which as you say, could be another year and a half.
So do we need more government assistance then? Or, even just handing out cash like America is looking like it's going to do?
It can't hurt, right? The wage subsidies prove to be very, very effective. And we're asking these businesses to tough it out for another year and a half. I think it's only fair that if we think of this team of 5 million, the 4.9 whatever rest of us help out those that are being effectively locked out so they don't lose their livelihood and lose their business. I don't think it's a big ask.
So would you see that as being targeted assistance, like, more wage subsidies, or would you see it as cash to every household, please go out and spend it? What would be most effective?
The targeted assistance in this case. Most of our economy is doing pretty well. It looks like we're going to get a good 3% growth rate this year, which is, really promising. So we are talking about that 5% of our economy that are doing tough. And they're not, some of them aren't failing, right? Some of them are scraping through just on domestic tourism. So it's not like we have to pick up all of the burden. But helping them through the next year in a targeted way, I think is a very good option. That spray of cash for everyone, that you do that in the middle of a recession. You do that in very, very bad times like another lockdown. That's the sort of wide range policy response. But this here is a very surgical, targeted response.
So when you talk about, growth forecasts of around 3.5%, is this rosier than you thought it would be? Because some people will be thinking, 2021, it's 2020, just over again.
Yeah, well, hopefully not. If 2020 to repeat, obviously we're going into more lockdowns, and the situation is getting worse, not getting better. We're hoping that we get through this year without more lockdowns, and if that takes place, then what we've seen so far has been quite a savage bounce back in consumer spending and confidence. And it's all about confidence. And, dare I say it, the housing market.
Do we, though, need to do some, innovative things? Like previously it's been talked about staggering school holidays, perhaps, so that those tourism businesses can maximise local visitors. Do we need to start thinking out of the box like that?
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I think the more of these sorts of things that we could do, the better. As a parent, having to look after a child over a Christmas break, which is as long as it is, 6 weeks, it's hard. So to stagger that out over the year, I mean, they get 12 weeks holiday in a year, which is hard for two working parents to cover. So anything around that can stagger the holidays over the year and get us travelling at different periods, I think is a great idea. We could also think of other areas in our economy that need injections, and obviously the housing market's one. We should be pouring more resources into that while we can, and infrastructure in general. There's a climate challenge ahead of us, right? We could be pouring more resources and innovation into dealing with that. There's a lot of other things that we could be doing while we can.
And that's Kiwibank Chief Economist Jared Kerr. With that vaccine timeline, regional tourist operators are grappling with another year of uncertainty, with some questioning whether their businesses will survive. Tourism reporter Tess Brunton has been speaking to operators.
The bad news just keeps coming for tourism operators up and down the country. Glacier Valley Eco Tours owner Tash Goodwin says visitor numbers are down by more than 95%, making the update on the border all the more disappointing.
For our business, we aren't sure what that means at this stage. We haven't made a call. It could mean that we hibernate, close the business down, start up again another time. We're not sure. It just depends.
She says her business and the whole of Franz Joseph is in limbo, waiting for overseas visitors to return.
We definitely need a date, and a really secure date of when the borders will be opening to Australia at least, but also to get people through to them, because everyone's just been holding out, and I know we've been holding out. You only had so much money, and that money dwindles just trying to stay open, that we need some rate relief on commercial rates.
Tash Goodwin is hopeful more New Zealanders will visit, saying their support would give them hope and help them through another tough year. Not far up the road, Okarito Kayaks co-owner Barry Hughes says they were fortunate to receive a few weeks of support from families after Christmas, before it quietened down.
It's harder to replace things, it'll be harder to stay on top of the maintenance around the property with a much smaller team. But normally we'd have a few seasonal guides helping us that we can't afford to employ this year, and it's hard to keep on top of all that work without that help. But yeah, we want to remain positive and still provide what we think is a great service for people to come and enjoy, and that doesn't change.
Barry Hughes says he'd welcome some government support targeted to communities hit hard by that closure, as Glacier Country looks down the barrel of another challenging year, with many struggling to pay their bills. Wings and Water Tiano Operations Manager and co-owner Ivan Kripner says there were just enough customers over summer to keep the wolves from their doorstep.
I don't see the town surviving that well. I mean, even in the last 12 months, things are not going well for the town. So if you walk down the main street at the moment, every third business is either closed or for sale. So that's in the first 12 months, and that's even with the help that we've got. So from here, with the borders remaining closed, it's not a healthy picture.
He isn't willing to see his historic float plane business go under without a fight.
The only diversification we're looking at doing, the wife and I applied for truck driving jobs yesterday. But the only way to survive is to look for other jobs, and the jobs aren't there. We're kind of stuck. So having the borders remain closed is certainly a problem for our company and our town.
Only 2 people dropped into Fjordan Jet yesterday. Today, its co-owner Chris Adams was carrying baleage on his farm with help from the Jet's sales and marketing manager to ensure they had some work.
The funding allocation that was given out by the government for the STEP funding has made it such an uneven playing field that some of them that got $500,000 will survive really well and can give discounts, where the rest of us that were honest and didn't apply, we're going to have to try and survive or hibernate, which isn't really an option, we don't think, for us. We want to be there for Tiana, because if too many companies hibernate or close down, what are these towns going to have to offer for people when they do arrive?
He wants the government to even out the playing field so smaller operators have more of a chance. Board of Airline Representatives NZ Executive Director Justin Tai-Umbers says the industry needs a lifeline from the government after going from 44 international connections to a dozen.
We're down to about 12 operating airlines at the moment, operating regular services into New Zealand. If we don't get an extension of support out of the government, I'd say we could expect to lose at least half of those by mid-year.
He says losing those airlines will just stall New Zealand's recovery. Tourism operators say they don't want a handout, but they hope New Zealanders and the government will continue to show their support. For Checkpoint, Cortes Brunton, tēnei.
A lot of you getting in touch about the checkpoints that some community groups are going to set up in Northland from tomorrow. Oliver in Kerikeri says, I live in Northland and I think these checkpoints are completely unnecessary and are just going to cause traffic chaos and will wind people up. The Ministry of Health, who are in a far better position to judge the situation, have kept the country at alert level 1, so checkpoints, he says, simply aren't needed and arguably aren't ever. Someone else has got in touch to say, I live in Northland and was going to spend money further north but won't now, as illegal checkpoints will not be stopped by the police. And someone else says the reality is COVID-free people are coming to spend money in Te Tai Tukaro and will turn around and go to the Waikato. Keep your feedback coming. We'll get to more of it shortly. A wave of bike thefts in Auckland has police warning riders to be extra vigilant when it comes to securing their cycles. But a leading Auckland cycle advocate believes there's something more sinister at play. She says a sophisticated black market costing owners and bike shops thousands of dollars is gripping the super city. Reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe have the story.
Bike shop owner Chris Hoff-Nielsen is taking some time away from work this afternoon, but it's not to visit family or grab a drink with a friend. Instead, he's off to confront a thief.
So today I'm going to look at a bike in CBD, a stolen bike that was stolen 2 weeks ago, and it's for sale for $1,000. It's got 200 kilometres on the clock at present, and it's a $2,500 bike, and it's for sale for $1,000, again without a key. And the person is willing to meet me, of course, because he doesn't realise who I be.
This is a sad exercise for Hoff-Nielsen. He actually feels sorry for bike thieves, often they're down and out and trying to make a buck. But it's also become commonplace. He opens one of his Bikes and Beyond stores for a day's trading. Someone comes to test a bike before riding off or simply steals one from outside his Newmarket shop. Hoff-Nielsen then takes to social media buy and sell pages to hunt it down. He estimates at least 6 of his e-bikes, which cost anywhere between $2,000 and nearly $20,000, have been stolen from outside his Bikes and Beyond shop in the last year.
We collectively pay. Your insurance premiums will be huge in 5 years if this continue, because of course each time it's thousands of dollars. Sometimes it's thousands of dollars in your contents insurance. It's probably the most expensive item after family rings in your personal items.
The police say they've seen an anecdotal increase in the number of bike thefts in central Auckland, but a leading cycle advocate believes a sophisticated black market is at play.
Meet Barbara Cuthbert as the head of Bike Auckland. She's a champion for the super cities cyclists. And she says Auckland's bike black market is booming.
I'm hearing from shops that it's just epic. That before they would occasionally have someone come in and have to replace a bike. Now it's a weekly and sometimes a daily event. So we've never seen bike thefts like this.
And there's a reason the super city is ground zero for the illicit bike trade.
So what we've got is that perfect storm, racing demand, diminishing supply or so supply, and now a black market that's just going. I've never, in all my time in cycling, experienced anything like the theft levels.
And Cuthbert believes the city's bike thieves are organised, driving around Auckland in vehicles big enough to store multiple stolen bikes.
This is just going around the city, picking them up to order, stacking the van, meeting the orders online.
Cuthbert wants Aucklanders to stay alert. Some bike thefts she's hearing about occur when riders least expect it.
People riding their e-bike home because they forgot their phone. So they zip into their house. They come out, the bike's not there. Somebody has seen them on an e-bike, followed them home, picked up their e-bike. It's really, it's extremely worrying, and it's really unsettling to me, the level of theft that is now occurring.
My Ride Takapuna store manager Steve Parker agrees bike demand is through the roof, saying sales post-lockdown have spiked.
Basically sold a year's worth of bikes in 6 months.
and everyone came out of the woodwork and they decided they wanted a bike, or they wanted their old bike fixed. Yeah, that sort of thing. Ordinary people, they decided they wanted to ride.
So once you've finally got your hands on that brand spanking new two-wheeler, what's the best way to keep it safe? There's your humble wire lock for a quick trip to the shops.
So Steve, we've got a number of locks here. Sort of walk us through them. What are the ones that are good to have and going to keep your bike safe, and what are the ones that maybe are a little bit easier to access?
Okay, we'll start with this. This is where it all begins. That's like a $20 lock. But the sort of lock you give to your child so they can lock it up at the playground. It's no more than a deterrent, really, though. A determined thief will get through that.
But if you're heading into highly populated areas, there are better options, like a D-lock with a key.
You really need something that's made of solid steel like that. They're not going to get through that. They'd need a blowtorch to get through that. $45-50 and you've got security there.
In a statement to Checkpoint, Central Auckland Area Commander Inspector Gary Davey said police are aware of an increase in theft reports involving bikes and e-bikes in Auckland City. He says police are making inquiries into a number of these reports and asks anyone purchasing a bike to be cautious and use verified outlets. If the sale price appears to be too good to be true, Inspector Davey says it probably is. For Checkpoint, Nick Trubridge.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, countering the misinformation and spreading the word about the vaccine. How the Ministry of Health plans to get its messages through. Another scorcher in Canterbury, but temperatures are set to drop dramatically. And the Cook Islands Prime Minister on why he's put the brakes on a flight from New Zealand. We would love your feedback. Have you had your bike pinched recently? Let us know the details. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to get to the headlines now with Susanna.
A spokesperson for community-run COVID checkpoints in Northland says the aim is not to scare people but to inform them. Te Tai Tokerau is expecting an influx of Aucklanders before the Waitangi Day long weekend, and some people are nervous after a local woman tested positive for COVID-19. Hone Harawira told Checkpoint that commercial and public service vehicles won't be stopped, but they will stop private vehicles to have a quick kōrero and hand out pamphlets. Widespread testing since the discovery of a COVID-19 case in Northland has not found any spread of the virus into the community. However, iwi leaders in the far north are advising kaumātua and those with health problems to stay at home. Waitangi celebrations in Northland will go ahead as planned, although the Waitangi Trust Board is constantly reassessing the situation. The board says Battle of Ruapekapeka commemorations will be held on February the 3rd, and the pōwhiri for the Prime Minister and Governor-General will take place the following day. However, the annual Iwi Chairs Forum, set down for February the 3rd till the 5th, will now be held online. The Climate Change Minister James Shaw says he welcomed the US rejoining the Paris Agreement when he spoke with his American counterpart John Kerry. Mr Shaw says Mr Kerry stressed that the US response to climate change would be driven by scientific evidence. He says they discussed the global climate talks in Glasgow at the end of the year and the impact of climate change on the Pacific. Otago gas fitter Michael Cartwright and his company Laser Plumbing Alexandra have been fined more than $120,000 over the death of a 12-year-old boy. The boy suffered carbon monoxide poisoning in the shower in 2018 due to a wrongly installed gas heater. Mr Cartwright signed off on his co-worker's installation of the heater despite never seeing the work. He and Laser Plumbing Alexandra were also ordered to pay the boy's family $70,000 in reparation. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. And you've tuned in time to hear business news with Nona Peltier. Nona, an Auckland-based health company, they've got this ambitious plan, digital plan. Explain to us what it's all about.
Well, it's another app.
Right.
So, we love apps, and here's one that you can use to manage your healthcare services. So you can book an online consultation with your doctor, you can get a prescription renewed, that sort of thing. And this is just an app. It's called Tend, and it's relatively new. It was launched late about October, and the company just raised $15 million to fund its expansion. It's not just for the users, it's also an opportunity for practitioners who want to retire or cut back on their hours to better manage their work-life balance, so to speak. There's some heavy hitters behind this app, by the way.
So which company is it, Nona?
It's called Tend. T-E-N-D.
Is that the name of the app?
That's the name of the app and the company behind it. So the heavy hitters are Cecilia Robinson, who's also behind the My Food Bag and other ambitious entrepreneurial type of businesses, as well as Marco Bogovetsky, who is the head of Infratel. And that's a very big company that manages a lot of assets. He's put his money into this venture as well. So we're expecting to see some big things with it, with this $15 million. Right now, it's just an Auckland-based service with a bricks and mortar facility in Kingsland. But expect to see more going on with that in the
What about the personal touch, do they think?
Well, we've all kind of we've adapted, I think, more, and we keep hearing this. We've done a lot of stories recently about how much New Zealand is prepared to go online to do all sorts of things. Services that you can get a phone call to your doctor rather than
and I
having
suppose
to
COVID has pushed us in that direction as well.
And in all ways, in so many different services.
Okay, global economic growth. What are we expecting this
year? So the
year?
International Monetary Fund has revised up its forecast by 1 whole percentage point. So it's now expecting a contraction. So that's still a recession, right, of 3.5% for the for the whole year of 2020.
Yep.
Now, so we've had a bit of a mixed results over the course of the last few quarters. So June was terrible, and we had a recession in the first March quarter, then the June quarter. September bounced back. Now we're looking at what's going to happen with the fourth quarter. So the Reserve Bank is expecting our annual inflation to have contracted 4%. So that's slightly more than what the International Monetary Fund is forecasting for the globe of 3.5%. So it could still improve. We'll see what happens. There's a lot of surprises out with the economic numbers. Very hard to read these days.
Any surprises on the market today?
Not today, but look. Tomorrow morning, anything could happen because the Federal Reserve has been meeting. They're going to come up with their decision on interest rates tomorrow around 8 a.m., followed by a press conference from the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. We are expecting the U.S. dollar to fall, depending on what he says. Depends on how dovish his stance is. So we're holding fairly steady at the top end of what we consider to be a range against the U.S. dollar, 72.3 U.S. cents, 93.4 Australian, 52.6 pence. That could change certainly overnight. And our top 50 index, we ended up 51 points, 0.4% higher to 13,374.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with our business news there. Now, in breaking news, the Ministry of Health is investigating 2 more possible cases of COVID-19 linked to Auckland's Pullman Hotel. The 2 people who also left managed isolation at the hotel are understood to have returned weak positive tests and are being retested tonight. Hone Harawira has told our producer he has heard from multiple sources about the 2 new cases. We have calls in to both the Ministry of Health and the Health Minister Andrew Little, and we will bring you any updates throughout the program. Social media influencers and community leaders will be among those used to spread information about COVID-19 vaccines. The Ministry of Health has confirmed a public information campaign will begin next month in an effort to stop the spread of disinformation online. And according to communication experts, it's crucial we act now before the vaccine lands on our shores. Louise Tanuth reports.
Applause has rung out in countries across the globe as they started vaccinating against COVID-19. And in a week's time, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine could have approval for use here. In Auckland, there's mixed feelings about getting the vaccine.
I wouldn't bother.
It's very new, but for sure.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it'll be alright. Yeah, everybody should take it.
Probably not.
I would take it, so then I could travel.
Quite happy to take it.
I probably wouldn't. Yeah, I just don't know much about it.
Most want to know more before receiving the jab.
Mainly the side effects, if there's anything.
I don't think they've had long enough to test it, and I'd be a bit nervous that I'd be getting something that was worse than taking the risk of perhaps contracting it.
Like, what's in it? Like, 'cause there's a whole bunch of conspiracy rubbish about that.
According to Director General of Health Dr Ashley Bloomfield, research suggests up to 20% of people are hesitant about getting a COVID-19 vaccine, while just under 10% are entirely opposed. A key issue is the online presence of anti-vaxxers before COVID-19 struck.
There was a lot of material already online, and that there is a sort of history of material. It's not just new hoaxes and conspiracy theories that have sprung up.
That's Dr Andrew Chen, who's a researcher in digital technology, ethics and policy at Auckland University. He says relying on people to fact-check for themselves is dangerous.
You may be sending them down this rabbit hole of information that already exists rather than them finding the legitimate sources that might say otherwise.
And now is the time to get the right information out.
Before the vaccine arrives, before we actually ask people to take the vaccine, there is probably a lot of pre-bunking work that can be done. We can't sort of just wait for the vaccine to come to New Zealand because the vaccine is already out there in other places around the world.
That's echoed by science communication specialist Dr Jess Berenson-Shaw.
We can let people know that they will be exposed to false information. We call this pre-bunking, or rather ironically, inoculation theory, talking about the likelihood that people will be exposed to false information. And then as a kind of last resort, we talk about debunking.
She says the correct information won't get through if the messenger isn't right, especially for Māori communities.
So if the types of good information being put out there about COVID only come from within that institution and not from trusted members of their own community, then there perhaps will be a disinclination to believe that good information.
To tackle it, the Ministry of Health says they're working on a misinformation and disinformation social media strategy and will use community leaders and social influencers to promote official information, with Te Puni Kokori and the Ministry for Pacific Peoples also involved. It won't address misinformation directly, instead aiming to make sure correct information is available to people. The campaign is set to roll out midway through next month, weeks before the first vaccine is expected to be given in New Zealand. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Louise Tenuth aho.
As Australia prepares to roll out its first coronavirus vaccine, a new advertising campaign is being launched today to convince people to get the jab. The government insists approved vaccines will be safe and effective and is confident the uptake will be high. The ABC's Jade McMillan filed this report.
COVID-19 has changed our lives.
A familiar presence during the earlier stages of the pandemic, former Deputy Chief Medical Officer Dr Nick Coatsworth is one of several health professionals sending a message of reassurance.
For us to live more freely, we need the added protection of COVID-19 vaccines.
The first phase of a $24 million public information campaign across traditional and digital media platforms starts today and also features the head of the Therapeutic Goods Administration, Adjunct Professor John Skerritt.
We only will approve vaccines when we have enough evidence that they work and that they're safe.
The TGA has just approved Pfizer's COVID-19 jab for use in Australia. Aged care and disability residents and staff will be among the first to be vaccinated from late February, along with quarantine and border workers and those in frontline healthcare roles. As more vaccines become available, it's hoped everyone who wants to receive one will do so by October.
This campaign couldn't be more crucial.
Professor Julie Leask from the University of Sydney specialises in the uptake of vaccines.
A good campaign will have three major elements. It will raise awareness, it will motivate people, and it will remind people. And it will also monitor and evaluate and get those feedback loops so governments know how they're doing and know how they can improve on their messages.
She says that's especially important on social media, where misinformation can spread quickly. Professor Leask has also stressed the importance of reaching a diverse range of people, something the federal government insists will be achieved through special committees representing Indigenous Australians, multicultural communities and people with a disability. And she says it's vital that leaders are upfront about what they do and don't know.
You need to have this very fine balance between encouraging and motivating people, letting them know what we do know now, which is that these are looking like very effective and safe vaccines, but also acknowledging that we are still learning about these vaccines.
One unknown is the effect on pregnant women, with the Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists finding there's insufficient evidence to recommend the routine use of COVID-19 vaccines during pregnancy. President Dr. Vijay Roach says while there's no indication the vaccines could be harmful to an expectant mother or her child, there's a lack of information.
We have the benefit in Australia and New Zealand of having very low rates of community transmission, and so therefore our advice is let's watch, let's wait, let's get some more data on safety in pregnancy prior to recommending it universally.
Although he adds that if a pregnant woman is considered particularly vulnerable to COVID-19, she should discuss the vaccination option with her doctor.
And that report from the ABC's Jade McMillan. It is 12 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. On the subject of the checkpoints, David's got in touch to say a serious challenge from Hone Harawira to the government. So here we need a clear and unequivocal response from the Prime Minister, from Calvin Davis, Willow Jean Prime and the Labour MP for Whangarei. This is a hard challenge. It needs to be met accordingly and the electorate will learn from how it is handled, says David. And after 6 tonight, we will be speaking to the Far North Mayor, John Carter, about those checkpoints. It's the end of the golden weather for the South Island at least, with temperatures set to drop by as much as 20 degrees over the next 48 hours. Parts of the South Island continue to bake and break records today, with Blenheim Airport recording 36 degrees, its highest temperature since records began, and Christchurch Airport topping 35 degrees for the second day running, the first time since 1954. Elsewhere, Ashburton also baked in 36 degrees and it was already 33 degrees in Timaru by 11 a.m. But the Met Service says whilst Christchurch reached a stifling 37 degrees last night, it'll struggle to get to 17 by Thursday as a cold front takes hold. Sally Murphy has more.
The Canterbury town of Rangiora holds the record for the hottest New Zealand temperature on record, 42.4 degrees in February 1973. But that record was nearly broken after locals captured the mercury on the temperature gauge in the main street, peaking at 42 yesterday afternoon. And whilst it was a slightly cooler 34 today, the soaring temperatures have been a bit too much for Rhonda, who we found sheltering from the sun behind sunglasses and a large hat.
A bit much actually. I'm trying to find places in the shade. I'm having a nice cold milkshake, that's my lunch. Yesterday was very, very difficult. I've just loved summer so much because it's been so much cooler and now we've got this heat wave coming through. I think it's very hard for a lot of people to deal with.
Everyone was doing the best they could to keep cool.
Air conditioning on in the car, air conditioning at home. I got my umbrella under my outside table. Drinking heat, yes. I lived in Australia for about 20 years and so yeah, I can take the heat.
Have a nice cold milkshake, stay in the shade and I'll probably go home and put the air conditioning on. Yeah.
It's pretty overpowering really, isn't it? Well, hopefully it's going to be short term, which is good.
And what are you doing to keep cool?
Heading for home and the central heating.
George had been out working in the sun all morning, putting up marquees, so stopped into Rangiora Flowers and Dairy for an ice cream.
But yeah, we're struggling getting by, taking more breaks than usual. So yeah, just working for like half an hour and then taking 10-minute breaks throughout the day. Longer breaks, trying to stay out of the sun as much as we can. Staying in the shade, drinking a lot of fluids, yeah.
Couple of ice creams?
If possible, ice creams, yeah.
Dairy owner Shailish says it's been pretty busy with milkshakes and real fruit ice creams being the favourites.
It's hot, it's quite busy, see the thick second milkshake, yeah, lots of ice creams, yeah. The flowers dying, too hot for them,
He says the heat is good for business, but he's not a fan.
Personally, I hate it. It's not me, I like cold rather than heat. In the heat, you can't protect yourself. In a cold weather, okay, you have 2 more layers and you won't do it.
And what have you been doing to keep cool?
Beer?
Beer?
Yeah.
Further up the coast in Weka Pass, Richard Murchison runs 3,000 ewes and cattle. Today, despite the soaring temperatures, he was out shearing. Mr Murchison says conditions are not too bad.
Certainly in the last week or so we have dried out in comparison to what we were. The rainfall is probably one of the better ones for January that I've seen in my farming career.
Inland towards Mount Somers in mid-Canterbury, arable farmer David Clark was harvesting garden pea seed when I called.
For arable farmers, this run of hot nor'westerly weather with high temperatures is absolutely brilliant for getting harvest done. Just what we needed, and it's almost a reflection of Canterbury of old, of hot, dry nor'west days. So, fantastic. Yesterday was very productive, and hopefully today will be as well. So, a lot of happy arable farmers around today.
The hot, dry weather also reached eastern parts of the North Island today, with Gisborne reaching 34 degrees. But Met Service meteorologist Talia Crabtree says the hot weather won't last.
We've only got 1 more day of hot temperatures left, at least for the South Island. It's looking like the temperatures will drop quite significantly overnight as of a cold front that's moving up the country later tonight.
For Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
The Cook Islands government has cancelled a flight bound for Rarotonga in response to the recent community case of COVID-19 in Northland. 30 Cook Islanders were expected on the flight, which is now due to take off on Saturday. The Cook's cabinet met last night to discuss the ramifications of the recent community case in New Zealand and their plan moving forward. RNZ Pacific reporter Sarah Jane Hopgood spoke with Cook Islands Prime Minister Mark Brown, who says they're taking a wait-and-see approach to the resumption of flights from New Zealand.
We're working very closely with New Zealand health authorities to determine the status of whether there is any community spread in New Zealand, and all indications so far are positive. However, there were some remaining results yet to come in as of last night, and we had to make a decision on the passengers. So we decided last night to defer any of those passengers until Saturday's flight, just as a precaution while we await the remaining tests that New Zealand is waiting on to give us an assurance at this stage that there is no community transmission.
And how soon are you going to hear back from New Zealand in regards to those results?
Well, we're hopeful that within the day or 24 hours, we should know a little more to enable us to make a decision then on what our response will be in regards to Saturday's flight that's coming into the Cook Islands.
What reassurance has New Zealand Ministry of Health told you that gives you peace of mind to continue business in your country?
Well, it really comes down to the testing regime that New Zealand has. Both of our countries have in place, standard operating procedures and protocols that has allowed the first leg of quarantine-free travel between our two countries. The basis of that is testing, but also communication between our two health agencies. And currently that work is continuing very, very well. So if anything changes in the testing results that come through, then of course we would have to change our response in regards to passengers coming in from New Zealand. But at this stage, if the situation remains as it is, we're hopeful for normal service to resume on Saturday.
By deferring flights or by making changes to the incoming flights from New Zealand, has that made a dramatic impact on the operations there in the Cook Islands in terms of the airports and the quarantine facilities?
No, this is something that we have built in and expected, that if the situation in New Zealand changes, if there is a case of a community outbreak, then an appropriate response by the Cook Islands would take place. And there'll be a range of different responses in that. It's important that we are able to demonstrate that we can pivot very quickly in the event of a case coming out, and we can respond appropriately to try and mitigate the risk of COVID coming into our country.
And that was Sarah Jane Hopgood speaking with Cook Islands Prime Minister Mark Brown. Broken Instruments is a new British musical which tells the story of Jewish musicians and their instruments during World War II. It focuses on people who were sent to the Auschwitz concentration camp, where the Nazis used them to form orchestras for the guards' entertainment. Produced during lockdown, this new musical will initially be available as an audio play, where the title track is also being released to mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day. The BBC spoke to the director and lead singer. We'll hopefully come to that story shortly, but let's get to some of your feedback on the issue of the borders being closed probably till the end of the year and the vaccine rollout taking until the middle of next year. This listener says international tourism would not have many visitors even if the border was open. Older, wealthy foreigners would not have come. It is not true we are sacrificing international tourism. We are doing the rational policy for the economy. And someone else says another year of border closures will be devastating to the live entertainment industry who tour international artists. The current situation, this person says, with managed isolation is a nightmare. It is a one-size-fits-all lottery. I spent hours and days trying to get a slot, they say. It will completely kill our industry, which has been struggling for a year now. We are in a worse position than that of the tourism industry. Blair, have we managed to get that track ready? Okay, so we've also had a lot of feedback on stolen bikes as well. $5,000 bike stolen, this listener says. Police provided with video footage, number plate and address. Thief confronted and admitted on selling. No action or communication from Rotorua Police, and all in capitals with 2 exclamation marks. Disappointing, this listener says. And someone says, we have had a bunch of bikes stolen from our apartment block in Torrens Terrace, Wellington. Body Corp are dragging their feet to get decent security in, even though some of the bikes are e-bikes and worth thousands of dollars. This is in response, obviously, to our earlier story about a spate of bike thefts in Auckland. They're e-bikes, and the police are warning cyclists to really get decent locks. And this other person has got in touch to say, bike not stolen, but so hot in Christchurch City today, my rear tyre exploded in the stand. A slow walk home listening to Checkpoint. Wow, small mercies there. We are having a lot of feedback from you on the checkpoints. Do keep it coming. And I don't think we've got that item, but let's instead go to John Carter, the Far North Mayor. He'll be joining us after 6 o'clock. So this is about the checkpoints. The police are not supporting the checkpoints in Te Tai Tukurau, but some community groups say they're going to go ahead with them tomorrow regardless. They're nervous about the situation, and they say they're just protecting their community.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. Health officials are investigating 2 more possible cases of COVID-19 linked to Auckland's Pullman Hotel. The 2 people who recently left managed isolation at the hotel are understood to have returned weak positive results and are being retested. The pair were staying at the same managed isolation facility as the woman who tested positive on Saturday, 10 days after she left. More than 300 guests who were staying at the Pullman Hotel at the same time as her were told to isolate and get retested. Yesterday, health officials received 2 positive COVID-19 test results from 2 people who had also recently left the Pullman. Further investigations, however, found one case was historical and the other returned a false test. A spokesperson for those setting up community-run COVID checkpoints in Northland say the aim is not to scare people but to inform them. Te Tai Tokerau's expecting an influx of Aucklanders ahead of the long weekend, and some people are nervous after a local woman tested positive for the South African strain of COVID. The police are not in support of the checkpoints. Hone Harawira told RNZ's Lisa Owen commercial and public service vehicles won't be stopped. And the COVID-19 response minister says New Zealand is near the front of the queue for COVID-19 vaccines, just not the emergency queue. New Zealand is expected to get its first doses of the Pfizer vaccine sometime before March. Chris Hipkins says it's right from a humanitarian perspective that countries dealing with large outbreaks get vaccines first. However, he says in terms of countries that have not sought emergency approval and are rushing vaccines out, New Zealand is at the front of the queue. Mr Hipkins says the pre-purchase agreements New Zealand has are up there with what other countries have been able to secure. The Waitangi Trust Board says celebrations in Northland will go ahead as planned. That is despite the Iwi Chairs Forum, which was set to be held at Waitangi from the 3rd to the 5th of February, being moved online. Waitangi Trust Board Chair Peter Tipene says all other events at Waitangi, including celebrations on the day, will happen. He says that will include the commemorations of the Battle of Ruapekapeka on the 3rd and the pohiri for the Prime Minister the next day. The total number of global coronavirus cases has passed 100 million. More than a quarter of them have been in the United States, with India and Brazil having the next highest totals. The BBC's David Shukman reports on why some countries might have seen so many people die. A 29-year-old man has been charged with aggravated robbery and wounding after a shooting at an Auckland dairy this month. Police say they arrested the man in Manukau this morning and he was due to appear in the Manukau District Court this afternoon. The shop worker who was shot has been discharged from hospital and is recovering from a leg injury. The US Senate has narrowly voted in favour of proceeding with former President Donald Trump's impeachment trial, but just 5 Republicans sided with Democrats, suggesting a conviction will be unlikely. It's 3.5 minutes past 6. Some New Zealand athletes may choose to skip the Tokyo Games this year due to concerns related to the COVID-19 pandemic. The head of the country's Olympic Committee, Karen Smith, accepts, though many areas of Japan is under a state of emergency due to a 3rd wave of infections. Organisers are vowing to press ahead with the Games due to start in July after being postponed for a year. Smith says the New Zealand Olympic Committee is planning for the Games to go ahead, but that everyone in its delegation, expected to be around 450 people, will have to decide whether they want to travel to Tokyo.
There's a lot of people there who have to consider their position just in terms of, can it fit into their life? Do they feel safe? Are their family comfortable that they should be doing that? Can they be away that long? Because we also have a period of time we need to be on the ground before the games start. You know, it's a big, big commitment.
Kieran Smith. The Breakers guard Corey Webster has passed a fitness test and will play in tonight's Australian NBL basketball game against the 36ers in Adelaide. Webster has recovered after putting a knife through his hand while cutting an avocado over Christmas. 6 spectators accused of racially abusing India bowler Mohammad Siraj during the 3rd test at the Sydney Cricket Ground have been cleared by Cricket Australia. Cricket Australia believes the Indian players were racially abused but have so far been unable to identify the culprits. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we've got a great prize for the first Hump Quiz of 2021. Ian Chapman's book on life in 60s New Zealand, OK Boomer. There's a window on the world of bonsai forests. They're the size of tennis courts, and they're bringing biodiversity back to Japanese cities. And ahead of their first tour of the year, we have a sofa session with the New Zealand String Quartet on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, fine and hot. A few showers spreading north from tomorrow afternoon. For the remainder of the North Island, also Nelson and Marlborough Sounds. Fine apart from areas of cloud, mainly tomorrow morning and evening. Brief showers spreading north tomorrow. For the rest of Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine and hot. Rain or showers spreading north tomorrow morning with some heavy rain inland from tomorrow afternoon. Otago and Southland, fine and warm with high cloud. A period of rain possible tonight, followed by scattered showers. For Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, mainly fine, with brief heavy rain in Fiordland spreading northwards tonight and tomorrow morning, followed by a few showers. Chatham Islands becoming cloudy tonight with a few showers from tomorrow afternoon. RNZ National, it's 6 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Now, as you heard there in the news, there are 2 other cases that are under investigation from the Pullman. We've had a statement from the Ministry of Health, and I'll just read that to you. They say 2 other former returnees who completed their managed isolation in the same facility and at the same time as the Northland case are now under investigation. That facility obviously is the Pullman Hotel. The statement goes on to say the 2 former returnees Both returned a positive test for COVID-19. However, it is yet to be confirmed if they are recent or historic infections. Further urgent testing is being carried out this evening. The two people are asymptomatic and have already completed their managed isolation and previously returned 2 negative tests. The Ministry of Health says both individuals are currently self-isolating at home. As a precaution, public health staff are checking details with the individuals about their movements since they left managed isolation to identify close and casual contacts if contact tracing is required. So that's 2 cases under further investigation, 2 returnees from the Pullman Hotel, which is where this Northland community case contracted the South Africa strain of COVID from another returnee. Which leads us to our next story. Police say there's no need for roadside COVID checkpoints in Northland, but mana whenua are going ahead with them anyway, and they're going to start from tomorrow. Te Tai Tokero's expecting an influx of Aucklanders ahead of the long weekend, and some people are nervous after a local woman got the South Africa strain from another person in MIQ, but was released after initially testing negative. And of course now there are these 2 additional cases that are being investigated. Well, joining us now is Far North Mayor John Carter. John, to start off with, do you support mana whenua going ahead with these checkpoints?
Good evening, Lisa, and Happy New Year to you. And the simple answer to that is yes, I do. I think there's every justification they're to be applauded for it, quite honestly. What they are doing is taking a very responsible attitude. They're not looking to turn people away. They're just saying to people, be aware. Are you taking all the steps you need to take? Are you sure that you're okay? Have you got any issues? Do you need to go and get checked? Do you need to go and get tested? And so they're just urging caution. We are, of course, looking to ensure that we have our visitors and, more important, or just as importantly, our permanent people safe. And I think they're doing a good job.
But is it actually needed? I mean, we're at alert level 1 and the police say, well, no, it's not.
Yes, well, I mean, they're entitled to a view. My view is I think we all need to be aware that we need to be sensible and approach this realistically. And we've had the one instance with the lady who's, to be congratulated on the steps that she's taken. But we all now we've been made aware that there may be another couple. We just need to be careful. We still don't know enough about this whole thing around COVID. And so, again, given that it's become part of us in the north with this lass that unfortunately contracted it, we just need to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And in my view, the road checks, they're not an imposition on anybody. They're just people are just being stopped and saying, how are you feeling? Have you had a test? How are you going? Can we help you? This is what you need to do, etc. It's just a reminder, Lisa.
So what then do you make of the police response that, they're not going to help? They're not going to help, which seems to indicate that then these are illegal.
No, well, they're not illegal, but we're working with the police and things will evolve and develop, and we'll continue on working with them, with all of us. It's our community, and with which the police are a significant and positive part, and we'll continue, and I will continue, and the iwi leaders will continue to work together.
So are you trying to change their mind, John? Have you had any conversations?
Not yet, but my understanding was there was discussions, and there have been discussions going on, and we'll continue to have those discussions. And tomorrow, one of the things I will be doing, Lisa, is having those discussions with the appropriate people.
I mean, how many people are you expecting to be headed your way? Because obviously it's going to be a long weekend, and then Waitangi following that.
Sure. And so, I mean, it's hard to estimate, but we, normally get a good number of visitors up north for Waitangi Day for the celebrations and that sort of thing. So there will be some visitors there. And again, we just want to make sure they're not at risk, and nor do we want them to put us at risk.
Would you have supported a short lockdown then?
Not at this stage. I think that would have been premature, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with these 2 other cases now, because if what we're hearing is a probability, then we will have to reassess the whole situation at that stage.
Some of the feedback that we've been getting into the program is, it's pretty against these checkpoints. People saying they're not legal, it's going to get ugly, it sounds threatening. Why does this group think they know more than the science of COVID? Let's listen to the views of the experts, and the government needs to respond to this serious challenge to their authority. I mean, what do you say to those people?
So I say to those people, that, we had the one case out there. There may have been an argument along those lines, but now that we've got these other 2 cases pending, it just shows what care we have to take. And this will evolve and develop, and we just all need to be working together positively to make sure that we're taking care of each and every one of us. The important thing, in my view, to remember about this is it's still evolving. And so it's just a precaution. It's not an imposition. The checkpoints would merely just say you pull up, you ask some questions, are you safe, are you well enough, all that sort of stuff. Do you need the test? We'll help you, we'll give you advice, whatever we need. And it's just a positive thing that we can do for our people in our community.
Appreciate your time this evening, John. That's John Carter, who's the Far North Mayor. Now, if you are just joining us, in the past few minutes, the Ministry of Health has confirmed it's investigating 2 more possible cases of COVID-19 related to Auckland's Pullman Hotel. The returnees completed their managed isolation in the same facility as a 56-year-old woman who also tested positive for COVID-19 after leaving the hotel. The ministry says the 2 former returnees in question both returned a positive test for COVID-19. However, it is yet to be confirmed if they are recent or historic infections. Further urgent testing has been carried out this evening, and both individuals are currently self-isolating at home. The Ministry of Health has declined requests for an interview, but joining us now is microbiologist Susie Wiles. Susie, what are the ramifications of these 2 initial positive tests?
Well, it sounds from the statement like there might be what we call weak positives. So that's when the test does come up positive, but not straight away. And that can indicate either the very start of an infection or can be somebody who's had an infection in the past. And this is just sort of the remnants of the viral RNA that, are still around, that are being dealt with by the immune system. So both of those 2 things are really, really important. And that's why further testing is being carried out to confirm that. So if it's a historical case, then this is obviously somebody who's had COVID in the past, is not infectious. If it's a weak positive that is actually the very start of an infection, then it may well just be as somebody is becoming infectious. So at the moment, we just need to wait and watch what happens with this. I mean, remember, the Ministry of Health don't confirm cases until they have actually clarified is this a case or not, and inform the people involved. So hopefully, we'll hear more by later tonight.
Are we then potentially looking at a shift in alert levels depending on which kind of situation these cases fall into?
Not necessarily. So it will entirely depend on what the people have been doing for the last few days. Remember that since the First Lady tested positive, when was that, a few days ago, the Ministry of Health have been contacting all the people who had come through managed isolation at the Pullman and getting them to isolate. So it all depends on, when this person was likely infectious and what movement they've made. So if they've actually been home that entire time, then this is not a cause for concern and moving up the alert levels. It still very much could be using our test, trace, isolate strategy to contain.
And what would the likelihood be of these 2 cases perhaps being the South Africa strain?
Again, that will entirely depend on, if it is a new infection or a historical infection, if it's a historical where they've come from. If it's the new infection, then they'll be looking at where they were located in the Pullman. What was their chances of transmission happening at the hotel.
How common are false positives?
So I guess we have this sort of definition of a false positive. So these are not false in that the they are an indication that viral RNA is present, but whether they are an indication of whether somebody is infectious or not. So they may well be cases that are, the test has worked, but are they telling us the person has an infection right now or is starting an infection, or are they telling us that it's a historical infection? So the test is extremely sensitive, and that's what all these follow-up things are all about. Does the person have symptoms? Because if they have symptoms right now, and they have been this test then, and they test positive, then that would suggest that they're kind of at the start of their infection. If they have no symptoms but maybe had symptoms in the past, then that's also an indication that yes, this is probably a historical case.
If it is an historic infection, why wouldn't have the last test that they had at managed isolation have shown that up?
Because people, depending on how long ago they had their infection, people can kind of cycle in testing positive and negative over the next few months. It all depends on how much viral RNA is around for the test to pick up. So we've seen this. There's been lots of reports of this overseas where people can, over a period of 2 months, one day test positive, the next day test negative, but they're not infectious at that stage. It's just the test is just picking up this kind of viral debris in the person's body.
So very much a wait-and-see situation that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why they're they'll be redoing the test. Again, if this is somebody who, was swabbed yesterday or this morning, those few hours between getting another swab can make all the difference if it is the very beginning of an infection. Because if it is the beginning, then we would be expecting their viral load to increase. And so it's more likely the test will become positive much faster. Again, if it's a historical infection, then it may well end up being negative because, it can do this. And that's when they'll also probably take some blood so that we can look for antibodies, but also be asking people about, have they had, when have they had symptoms, have they been around anyone? So, yeah, wait and see. And then hopefully if it is a positive test, then it'll be, what's the genome, doing the sequencing and things. So hopefully we'll have more information later tonight, and then depending on what it is, maybe more information tomorrow.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. That's Dr. Susie Wiles, who's a microbiologist, talking there about these 2 other cases that are under investigation, potential cases by the Ministry of Health. They are also in the Pullman Hotel. They're being retested to find out what exactly their situation is. It is almost 6:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Waitangi Day is set to go ahead as planned this year, despite other large-scale events in the north being moved online or postponed. It comes as iwi leaders decided to move the National Iwi Chairs Forum online in the wake of the confirmed community case of COVID-19 in Northland. Mediana Johnson has more.
Te Tai Tokoro iwi leaders met on Monday to discuss how best to protect their people from the community case in the region. Ngāpuhi Pandemic Response Project Lead, Tia Ashby, was at the hui.
The key messages from it was that koia and kaumatua, those over 50 or immunocompromised have been advised to stay home, and that if they need to attend, important appointments, then to wear a mask.
She says iwi are not putting restrictions on tangihanga, but asking people to keep them small where possible, keep their distance and wash their hands. Harry Burke-Hard is the chair of Te Kahui o Taunui, Te Tai Tokoro iwi leaders, and says resurgence protocols have been put in place.
Part of that is making sure we're giving them clear messages, communicating well with them. These are heightened periods of anxiety, so misinformation is worse than no information.
Iwi leaders also discussed whether large-scale events should go ahead. This year's hosts and Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei and Te Tai Tokoro iwi leaders have decided the National Iwi Chairs Forum will move online instead of being held at Waitangi. Ngāti Whātua Chief Operations Officer Anthony Thompson says it wasn't an easy decision to make.
We went back to the National Iwi Forum with the proposal that an online forum would be a better solution in context of what's currently happening. It was a very hard decision to make. It wasn't made overnight or on a whim, and it was a decision that was backed up by a lot of research.
The big question mark has been whether Waitangi celebrations will go ahead as planned. As of just before 5 p.m. today, Waitangi National Trust Chair Peter Tipene says it will.
Everything is on schedule as per those previous plans, but of course there's a heightened sense of keeping our people as safe as possible, but we're appraising the situation every hour, and up until this point, we think that it's safe enough to go ahead with things as we had previously planned.
Peter Tipene says this will include the commemorations of the Battle of Ruapekapeka on the 3rd and the pōwhiri for the Prime Minister and Governor-General on the 4th. Meanwhile, alternative arrangements have been made for other events that run alongside the National Iwi Cheers Forum. The Māori Constitutional Convention will be online, and the Iwi Housing Symposium, due to be held at Orake Marae, has been postponed until further notice, as has the Hauora Symposium. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Miriana Johnson, tēnei.
A Hawke's Bay Council review has found the region has a mess of business support groups trying to do the same thing. One of the groups fears its days are numbered and its removal could hobble Hawke's Bay's economy. Here's Tom Kitchen reporting from Napier.
Too many brands, too much confusion. Hawke's Bay NZ, great things grow here, Be in the Bay, Business Hawke's Bay Chamber of Commerce. Who are these groups? What do they do? And what does it all mean? That's what a regional economic development review of Hawke's Bay has investigated. And why can't the region have one group that brings it all together? Gus Chanaris of Giblin Group, who completed the review, says while there were no major gaps in services, there were questions on who did what.
Some of the feedback from the councils themselves was that it wasn't always clear who had the lead on different things. It wasn't clear where they needed to collaborate.
Business Hawke's Bay is an independent, business-led economic development agency in the region, but it's considering winding down. It gets $330,000 a year from local councils, but the councils have repeatedly denied it extra funding. Business Hawke's Bay Chairman Stu McLaughlin says he understands there are issues.
A couple of things were made pretty clear in that report that, we need to do better in terms of delivery of economic development in Hawke's Bay. It's a bit fragmented and there's duplication, potentially competition.
But he says if Business Hawke's Bay has to wind down within a few weeks, that leaves a huge gap until a new group is formed.
If Business Hawke's Bay did wind up in the near future, there's potentially a vacuum for a period. The concern we've got is all of the momentum that we've created, the IP, the projects and programs could be lost.
But the councils say the request by Business Hawke's Bay for the extra funding was unrealistic. Speaking on behalf of all the councils, Central Hawke's Bay Mayor Alex Walker says their calls were ad hoc.
There had been growing calls from them about their funding, and there had been growing calls from councils back to them about displaying the value that they were adding and making sure that added up.
There's also talk that the underlying regional economic development strategy called Matariki is a failure. Matariki was launched by then Economic Development Minister Stephen Joyce in 2016 with an aim to accelerate job growth and innovation in the Bay. At a regional council meeting today, Deputy Chairman Rick Barker questioned if Matariki was working. He laughed when the council chairman told him one of their achievements was the group met.
The fact that list one of its achievements they've met is about the same as me getting to exam and putting my name at the top of the exam paper expecting 10% marks for that. I'm frustrated that we put all this money in and I can't see runs on the board, to be honest with you. I'm being the curmudgeon here. I think someone has to sort of call it.
But Mayor Alex Walker says such views are out of touch and outdated. As co-chair of the strategy group, she calls Matariki a triumph.
The Matariki strategy has supported more than $200 million worth of provincial growth fund funding coming into the region. We've had outstanding employment statistics in the last 6 months, which have been supported by all our Matariki partners and the work that we've been doing.
Councils will get the next phase of the review underway, getting ideas for a new overarching support group together. The community is expected to get its say in the middle of this year. For Checkpoint, ko Tom Kitchenaho.
The supply of coronavirus vaccines around the world is now a critical issue as countries try to curb high infection rates. And the European Union is angry because it says it's not getting its fair share. And it's threatening to impose controls on the export of vaccines made within the bloc. EU leaders are warning coronavirus vaccine manufacturers that they must deliver on their promises. Here's the BBC's Nick Beak.
The lorries leaving Pfizer's main factory this morning are bringing hope to the world, laden with one of the vaccines that will help transport us out of the COVID nightmare. With such precious cargo on board, they're escorted all the way. But now there are concerns that fewer of these jabs could be coming to the UK. The European Union is angry that another company, which makes the Oxford AstraZeneca shot, will be sending it millions fewer doses than promised. It wants to know why. And in response, it's announced that vaccines leaving the EU are to be more tightly controlled, including those destined for Britain.
This new schedule is not acceptable to the European Union. In the future, all companies producing vaccines against COVID-19 in the EU will have to provide early notification whenever they want to export vaccines to third countries.
European Union countries have been criticised for the slow rollout of vaccines compared with the likes of the United Kingdom. And they won't be helped by the temporary slowdown in production here in Belgium at the main Pfizer plant. But this latest row over the supply of vaccines, who gets what and when, threatens to make this international health crisis even more political, at a time when countries are being told they need to work together to get us out of this crisis. The UK was the first in the world to approve a vaccine, and more than 7 million people have now received at least one jab. The minister responsible for the vaccine programme conceded supplies were tight, but said the UK would still get enough doses.
I'm very confident with the team. We talk to them all the time. They're confident they will deliver for us, yes. And AstraZeneca, the bulk of AstraZeneca Oxford is manufactured in the UK because we made that early investment in manufacturing capacity in the UK, which is also good news. So I'm confident we'll meet our mid-February target and then we'll keep vaccinating beyond that.
The global race to vaccinate against COVID-19 has exposed big inequalities, with poorer countries, particularly outside Europe, facing a long wait. The way out of this pandemic is by no means easy.
And that was the BBC's Nick Beak with that story. And let's bring you up to date on the situation with COVID-19 here in New Zealand. You may have heard that 2 further returnees who have completed their managed isolation in that Pullman hotel where the latest case caught COVID, well, they are now under investigation. The 2 former returnees have both returned positive tests for COVID-19, but it's not yet confirmed if they are recent or historic infections. Now, this is from the Ministry of Health. They say further urgent testing has been carried out this evening. The 2 people are asymptomatic and they had already completed their managed isolation, and both of them had previously returned negative tests. Now, they are currently self-isolating at home, and as a precaution, Public Health says they're checking details with the individuals about where they've been, their movements since they've left managed isolation, to identify close and casual contacts. And this is why Hone Harawira says this uncertainty means that's why they need to set up checkpoints in Northland. Not a lot of you supporting him there. Some saying Northland checkpoints are nothing but arrogance and grandstanding, opportunistic and full of self-importance. I hope the police move on them. Someone else say they're good, these checkpoints, just reminding city visitors to be careful and look after the people who live locally. There'll be more on this story tomorrow on First Up.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Health Ministry is doing further urgent testing to determine if 2 more possible cases of COVID-19 linked to Auckland's Pullman Hotel are recent or historic infections. Northland Police say there is no need for roadside COVID-19 checkpoints, but Mana Whenua say they aim to inform visitors and allay local people's fears. Chris Hipkins says New Zealand is near the front of the queue for COVID-19 vaccines, just not the emergency queue. Waitangi Day celebrations will go